Plug-in hybrid vehicles, they're kind of the jack of all trades of the motoring world, offering all of the advantages of a short-range electric vehicle, coupled with the efficiencies of a mild hybrid, but then also the longer legs for those trips away when you want to get away from the grid. But what do you think is the world's best-selling PHEV? It's actually this, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, and I've come all the way to South Australia to have a sneaky little look at the all-new 2022 version. If you like this video, you know what to do. Click like or consider giving us a follow, and if you ring the bell, then you'll get notified whenever we drop a new video, which is every Tuesday and Thursday. The all-new Outlander has been in Australia for a little while, but powered only by petrol engines. This is the plug-in hybrid version. Other key changes are it rolls on an all-new platform shared by the Nissan X-Trail, and just look at that lovely styling. The dynamic shield, I think, been applied really nicely, dare I say it, quite handsome. This car will go up against things like the Mazda CX-5 and Toyota's RAV4, but they can't compete with plug-in hybrid power. So let's get stuck in and see how this thing competes. Don't get too excited. I might be on one of Australia's premier racetracks, but I'm not here to set a lap time. I'm here because this version is a pre-production Outlander and it can't be registered on Australian roads. But I'm still very lucky because it gives me a great idea what to expect from the production version when it arrives. And there is so much to take in. I don't know where to start, but I'm going to start with the interior because I don't think I've ever seen a Mitsubishi that looks this premium. The materials are lovely choices. There's soft touch and quilting in all the right places. There's lovely choices of materials down here, really premium looking. Just a little bit too much of that piano black, which is already starting to look a bit grotty with fingerprints. But other than that, this is such a cool interior. I particularly like this sort of tan colored synthetic leather on the dash and on the center console, and matching stitching everywhere as well. This Outlander has taken such a step up. And it's bolstered by these lovely digital displays. The central one is functional and pretty easy to use, but perhaps showing its age, maybe a bit of a carryover from the last version. But there in front of the driver is an absolute centerpiece. Lovely customizable display. I particularly like this version with the sort of rotary dials to show you all the speed and battery levels and things. And there's another important enhancement for the interior for the 2022 version. The rear axle has been modified to incorporate the motor and the inverter into one unit. And that's freed up lots of space over the boot. And that means you can have the PHEV as the 5+2 seater at last. And that's a massive improvement. And then there's the way this thing drives. Now, I have to say the suspension tune is not the version we're going to get for Australia because it's pre-production, but I think we probably should. It's actually really good. I'm on a perfectly smooth racetrack, so it's not going to show up any of its behaviour on bump and rebound and nasty surfaces, but this car is so much more fun to drive than I was expecting. There's a little bit of body roll, like that, but the steering is really quite sensitive, and the turn-in is lovely because the battery is there in the middle of the car, so the front to rear weight distribution is actually way better than I was expecting. And then if I reach down here, I've got a mode that's called Power, and what that does is allows full electric power to be sent to the axles while also using the petrol engine to partially drive the front axle, and the performance is really surprisingly good. When you're coming out of a corner just like that, the torque is instantaneous. Now that shouldn't be surprising because this is essentially an electric vehicle and that's what EVs do so well, but it does catch me out every time. I'm dialing in the power a bit early because I'm not expecting it to be quite so instantaneous. This car is more of a driver's vehicle than I was really expecting. When you push it like that, the Eco tyres do reveal their limits quite quickly, but it's not the fault of the chassis or the way this thing is put together. There's lots of other drive modes as you might expect. The tarmac is kind of in place of a sport mode, but there's lots of other off-road modes and there's an eco mode as well. They all make perfect sense and are pretty intuitive, but it's also backed up by various EV modes. Now, normal just makes the best use of the battery. It tries to use EV as much as possible, but will bring in the engine if necessary. Then there's the pure EV mode, a save mode that will bring in the engine as soon as you deviate more than 5% away from the battery power. And then there is the charge mode, which keeps the engine running all the time to just boost the battery as much as possible. None of those are buried in confusing sub-menus or difficult to find places. It's all very easy to use and much better than I was expecting. The battery has grown from 13.8 kilowatt hours to 20, and that is increased range under battery power only to 84 kilometers. Now that on average is very high for a plug-in hybrid. Other improvements include more power from its electric motors, both the front and the rear, and the combined outputs are now 185 kilowatts and 450 newton meters of torque. But yes, you heard me correctly. It has 2 electric drive motors, which means this thing has 4-wheel drive. All versions of the new plug-in hybrid Outlander are 4-wheel drive, and both axles are electrified. So the obvious thing is to head to some off-road action and see how it gets on. Interestingly, the front axle doesn't have as much power as the rear, but it has more torque. 85 kilowatts on the front axle and 100 kilowatts to the rear. And from this quite steep climb, certainly no problems with traction. Even though, remember, we're rolling on eco tires, certainly not all-terrains for this kind of driving. It's really interesting to see how the different electrified axles share power around. But if I take it over here, this should be an extra little challenge for it. This is a really steep climb, dusty and chalky. So now, if this was a normal SUV, I'd think we're stuck. But what you do is you just keep your foot planted and it just sorts it all out. You don't have to rev it to the limiter. It just carefully analyzes how much power it's got at each corner, sends the right amount of electric torque, and that was actually almost effortless. This time, going to hit hill descent. Again, something you find in a lot of SUVs these days, but I mean, it's hard to fault. And all the time that engine's just purring away in the background. It's not revving hard, it's just topping up that battery, so we've got full electric power as and when we need it. Let's be honest, this kind of off-roading is way more than most people would throw at a car like this. And even in that thick mud though, had a lot of water last night. It's turned this into a bit of a quagmire. It's dried out, but there's still the odd boggy spot. No problem at all. Pricing, therefore, is what it really comes down to. It's got an engine and a battery and 2 motors. Now for PHEVs, that normally means they're very expensive. But this, I'm reliably informed, although Australian pricing isn't yet confirmed, will start at around $49,000. And this version, the top spec, will be about $67,000. So on the general scheme of things, a 7-seat plug-in hybrid electric SUV, it's a bit of a bargain. So the 2022 Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV can be an electric vehicle when you want it to be, but then it can be a mild hybrid for the rest of the time. On the road it drives really nicely with quite good manners, and then you take it off-road and it has surprisingly good all-terrain ability. And you get all that at what looks like it's going to be a pretty compelling price. The car that can do it all, maybe, but before you make that conclusion, there's one more thing I want to show you. This is Mitsubishi's Dendo House, and it's a cute little project that demonstrates some really big potential. That car has underneath it a 20 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery, so why not use it to power other stuff? Everything in this little house is currently running off the Mitsubishi. That coffee machine, the TV, I could plug in my laptop, the lighting, even heating and air conditioning could be powered from that car out there. What the Dendo House represents could be your caravan, or it could even be your actual home, because that car incorporates V to X, V to H, or V to G. All those possibilities are made possible with clever bidirectional charging. It's not just a silly little exercise, it will actually happen. You will be able to run your house off of a car like that for, say, times like there's a power cut or perhaps a natural disaster. That's a serious bit of technology in that car. But even if you didn't have the car parked outside, this house has its own power supply as well. There's a battery underneath the floor, just like the Mitsubishi, and on the ceiling is a solar array. So this little project demonstrates in the future how we'll be able to share power between vehicles and homes and the grid. And it's a really exciting future. Some pure EVs can pull the same stunt, but the difference with the Outlander is it has its own generator under the bonnet, extending its power supply duties many times over. In its native Japan, the Mitsubishi could keep the lights on in an average household for up to 12 days, and that creates all manner of new exciting possibilities. With its new longer range hybrid system, more sophisticated design and boosted technology, the new range-topping Outlander has never been more versatile and kit-packed. But there's one extra you unfortunately can't add from the options list, and I think it might be the coolest of them all.